Hello, Nick here. Welcome back to a dramatic reading of The Return of the Indian, the second book in the Indian in the Cupboard series by Lynn Read Banks. And we are picking up at chapter 12 now, The Troops. And we're going to find out how Omri and Patrick might raise an army to help Little Bear win back his village from the conquerors, the invaders that he was when he was summoned back from the cupboard. He was fleeing from. He had been injured by at the start of the book. So now we're going to see if they can handle raising an army for Little Bear, or if that's going to be a little bit too scary. We'll figure out what happens here. The boys ate lunch decorously downstairs, so as not to arouse suspicion. So they're really showing off, hey, we're having lunch up here. Although it was sheer agony to leave the attic bedroom when so much was going on. Little Bear was absolutely in torment, they could see, and though Omri, for his part, was in no hurry to send him back, he felt they must do something as soon as possible to further the plan. Omri's parents were full of the party they were going to. Omri's parents were full of the party they were going to that evening. Adil and Gillian were going to the movies and were arguing fiercely about which one. Gillian was carrying on a side argument with his parents about the desirability of hiring a video, which he assured them would save far more than it cost in the end. I think hiring a video is more like renting a video. Remember, these are slightly older books, so video rentals were still a thing at the time of this writing. Parental reaction to this excellent idea was usual, automatic, and negative. All this could not help seeming ridiculously trivial to Omri, with so much on his mind. They had been out to the model shop before lunch. Omri had taken along one of his books on Indians and tried to find the ones who were dressed in the distinctive Iroquois clothes, floppy leggings with feather decorations, moccasins gathered around the ankles, a sort of sporran thing hanging like an apron from the waist, turkey feathers, and a band around the forehead. And by the way, if you're thinking, what are the chances of a hobby shop or a toy shop having that? I collected little figurines, still do, from different time eras, like military figures and stuff. And I'm always impressed by the accuracy and the variety of these types of little plastic figures. Very popular around the whole world, collecting these miniature figures, and you can get ones from the Roman Empire, from the Napoleonic era, colonial times, all sorts of stuff. So I really believe that they would have had some options here at a nearby hobby shop during this time. Only there weren't many like that, what we just described. It was extraordinary what a variety of Indian costumes there were. See, and the model shop had what happened to be representatives from a dozen tribes. Omri knew how bitter the hatred between warring tribes could be. The Algonquins, for instance, were the Iroquois' mortal enemies. It would be no use bringing any of them. But since there weren't anything like enough what uh, but since excuse me here, but since there weren't anything like enough that he was sure were Iroquois, Omri had bought some others he wasn't sure of in the hope that Little Bear would recognize them as belonging to some friendly Indian nation who would agree to help the Iroquois in their hour of trial. Patrick, book in hand, was at another shelf, looking at English soldiers of differing periods. He wanted to find some who might have fought the French in America. Remember, this is the battle that Little Bear was pulled out of when he was brought out of the cupboard for the second book, was with the French, who were fighting against the Indians in what was called the French and Indian War, in North America, but it was also called the 7 Years' War when looked at globally, because this was the French Empire and the Spanish Empire up against the British Empire globally. And the Indian tribes, the Native American tribes in North America, were kind of split along those two lines between French and the British. So Patrick's trying to see if he can get some British soldiers who might be from that time period to say, yeah, we'll fight our mortal enemies, the French. We're fighting them anyway, right? He wanted to find some who'd fought the French in America. Omri wasn't keen on bringing any white men into it, but Patrick said they were in it already. I bet they'd handle modern weapons better than a bunch of primitive Indians anyhow. Again, remember, if you can't remember from the last session, it was Little Bear's idea. Why don't we give modern weapons to people, to Indians, Native Americans from our time, and that'll give them an advantage when we send everybody back through the cupboard, back to Little Bear's village, assuming that they can even do that. They don't know. Omri told him not to be so racist. But when Patrick found some that looked right, according to an illustration in the book, Omri made no objection to buying even one mounted officer. The horse, a handsome black, made him much more expensive. The whole lot, about 50 assorted Indians and 5 soldiers, set them back over 10 British pounds, which for Omri was 2 weeks' pocket money. Patrick chipped in, though he hadn't brought much. So now they had this bag full of potential allies. For Little Bear and the boys couldn't wait. Excuse me, once again, I don't know what's happening here. So now they had this bag full of potential allies for Little Bear, and the boys couldn't wait to get started. I think I'm just too eager reading here. As soon as lunch was over, the rest of the family scattered, and the house became quiet. On the way upstairs, Omri said, "Do you think we dare bring them outdoors?" "I want to start putting things in the cupboard," said Patrick. "So do I. I meant bring the cupboard out too. Then if any shooting should start, it won't be so dangerous." "Why should it be less dangerous outdoors?" "I don't know. It just feels as if it would be." "Well, okay. But what if your father or anyone comes out in the garden? Dad's painting in his studio. Anyways, there's a hedged off bit down at the bottom, which is just shrubs. He never goes there." They found the little people waiting for them anxiously. "Where Omri go so long time?" Little Bear demanded at once. "Calm down. We've been getting the men." Little Bear sat upright, his eyes glowing. "Show!" In a minute, carefully, Omri lifted the matchbox bed onto the seed tray. "Bright stars, cover him up warmly. We're going outside." She put the glove finger around him to the armpits, so it must be a little, sleeping bag, while Boone ran up the ramp and pulled it up behind him. The 2 ponies were munching grass in their fenced-off paddock. Omri picked the whole thing up, while Patrick took the cupboard, and the bag of new men. As an afterthought, he slipped Matron in his pocket. Matron was the nurse they brought back from modern times to perform the surgery on Little Bear that saved his life. Then they cautiously trooped down the stairs and out the kitchen door into the back garden. It was really a lovely place, far better than their old garden. It was not just a rectangle of lawn with a few flower beds. It had nooks and crannies. Omri headed for his favorite corner, a clump of bushes with a patch of grass in the middle, where rhododendrons and other tall plants kept prying eyes at bay. The sun was high, and the place was sheltered from the wind. Still, Omri suggested Little Bear should be put into the longhouse to keep warm. "No, not want. Want be in sun. Sun give orenda." "What's that?" Little Bear looked baffled. "Not know orenda?" "Orenda for all men. Life strength. Sun give. And rain. Orenda in animal. Plant. All thing. Master of good make. Now Omri be master of good. Make brave, many. Fight for Little Bear people." Omri felt a cold shiver. He didn't like the idea of playing God, because that's what the master of good sounds like. But it was too late to back out now. They laid the seed tray and the cupboard on the grass. Boone at once put the ramp back in position, saddled his pony, tested his lasso, which he had kept coiled around the pommel, and set off for a ride. It was rough going, as the grass in the shrubbery was not often mowed, but he didn't seem to mind. "You fellows settle things. I'm going for a gallop." "Keep us in sight," said Patrick. "That's the same as saying keep the Rocky Mountains in sight," laughed Boone. He waved his hat at them and went racing off between the grass stems, shouting, "Yippee!" in the approved cowboy fashion. One of the most satisfying things about Boone was the fact that he always behaved exactly as the boys expected. This helped to balance Little Bear. They never knew what to expect from him. The boys now began to set out the little men they'd bought in lines for Little Bear to inspect. Even though the Indian was well aware they couldn't see him, he seemed to feel ashamed before them, lying in what he called white man bed. He made Bright Stars help him off of it and into a stack of rhododendron leaves he ordered to be laid on the earth. It looked very grand, like stiff layers of shiny dark green leather, but not very comfortable, Omri thought. Little Bear sat cross-legged and stared narrowly at the Indian figures, one by one. Several times he demanded that one of them be brought and laid before him for closer inspection. Some he discarded with an imperious wave of his hand. Once he uttered a deep growl. Why bring Algonquin enemy? Sorry, said Omri, hastily removing the offending figure. I thought he was a Mohawk. He dresses like one. Mohawk part of Iroquois nation. Omri not see difference? Stupid. Big eyes not best. About 3/4 of the men they'd brought were eventually approved. Then Little Bear turned his eyes to the British soldiers. They were rather splendid in their white breeches, scarlet coats, and 3-cornered hats. But Omri didn't think they looked very businesslike. The white bands crossed on their chests and backs made ideal targets, but perhaps the brilliance of their uniforms was intended to intimidate the enemy. Anyway, they were all armed with muskets tipped with fearsome-looking blades. Omri bent one easily with his finger, thinking how sharp and lethal that would be when the cupboard had done its work and those bayonet swords became gleaming steel. These no good, Little Bear pronounced abruptly. Patrick and Omri were astonished. What's wrong with them? Said Patrick. Are they from the wrong time? Right time. Near right. English soldier like that fight French in big battle soon. French win. Oh? Why? Fight better. But also, English dress stupid. This, he pointed contemptuously to the redcoats and white trimmings. Catch sun. Call eye of French soldier. Gun point. Pshoo! He made a shooting noise. No good if soldier proud. Must dress so enemy not see. Which is true. How do the English soldiers dress now? More like Indian. Earth colors. Like leaf. Shadow. More good for hide. Jump out on enemy. White man learn much from Indian. So what he's saying is the British soldiers they're showing used to be what the British looked like until they learned from the Indians they should blend more in with the background. Now who's proud? Patrick whispered to Omri. Little Bear hear that, the Indian roared. Really, he had ears like a bat. Well, anyway, so you don't want us to bring these men to life, Patrick said hurriedly. Not need. Enough with braves and now guns. The boys exchanged glances. This was tricky. Little Bear was proud, and he wouldn't like the suggestion that the white men might be better with modern weapons. Listen, Little Bear, Omri began coaxingly. Suddenly they froze. Omri heard his mother's voice calling from the house. Omri! Omri! What? He called back, getting quickly to his feet. Darling, Kitsa's caught a bird. Kitsa's their cat. Or a mouse or something. Anyways, she's playing with it on the big lawn. Can you? Omri's mind seemed to blow hollow like an egg. He stopped hearing what his mother was saying, but Patrick was up in a flash, charging through the bushes like a madman. Omri came behind him, the branches smacking him across the face. On the main lawn was Kitsa, her blackness and whiteness beautiful, sleek and deadly in the sunshine. She was crouched and concentrated, her tail nip just twitching. All else about her perfectly still. There was something small and helpless and alive in the grass in front of her. And here on the previous page, I didn't want to give it away, is Kitsa the cat, who must have tracked down Boone and his horse as they went galloping through the grass. And we'll hear more about that on our next chapter, chapter 13, A Death and a Healing. Let's hope the death is not from any of our favorite characters, but you'll find out on my next video. Thanks for subscribing if you already have. Please go ahead and hit the subscribe button if you haven't, and you'll get updates from this and a couple other great timeless novels that I'll be reading over the next few months. Thanks.